Hello there and welcome back to the AgostinhoZinga show, episode number 487, and this is your host AgostinhoZinga. Thank you so much for tuning in once again, wherever this may find you. If you're watching this via YouTube, you know what to do. Smash the like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment down below. If you're listening via the podcast app, a 5-star review and a share will help the show to go a long way, and of course support for your Patreons welcome too. You can find that link in the description. Support for little as $1, equivalent of £1 per month. You get access to all my bonus content. Don't delay, get involved in there today. Oh god, this is the start of the week. Monday, here we go. Favorite day of the week to get going, start a fresh, start a new, turn over a new leaf and all that malarkey, all those big rah-rah motivational things, because at the moment we all need all the motivation we can get, because it's dark and it is gloomy and it is sad and it is negative and depressing out there. So if anything, the Monday should be a good chance for you to get going, decide to do something new, change your approach to something, whatever it may be, just do it. But there's also a recognition, there also needs to be an understanding or a realization that the vibes have been somewhat off. I think a lot of people realize that. I think if you've been out, especially in London, in the UK in general, I think you can attest to the fact that nightlife just isn't the same as it was prior to COVID. Whether or not it's because, the majority of the normies have been scared away, whether it's because we don't have the tourist population to maybe jam pack and ram up the clubs, whether it's because people have just generally moved on and decided they don't want to be spending their time, drifting around the strip in East London anymore, drinking or sipping on shitty K-ciders. Who actually knows? But there's no denying that something has definitely changed. There is something different in the air. We can't really put our finger on it, and it's weird because part of me thinks, you know what, maybe next year when things get back to normal, right, when things are a bit less crazy than they are now at the moment in other parts of the world, and people start to move around a bit, maybe it will improve. But all in all, from the pictures I've seen, videos of places and people raving in all sorts of different locations, and again, I'm only looking at it through the prism of raving because that's specifically one of the main things I'm interested in, it just seems like something's off. It's not really giving what it should be giving, in my opinion. I don't know if it's for you, but that's why I generally think it's not really giving what it should be giving. And maybe it's because of what's going on in the world, but part of me thinks a lot of people don't really care what's happening in the world and just want to go back to normal, and they kind of purposely burying their head in the sand, as I've been with this Afghanistan stuff that's going on at the moment. There's just nothing we can do. We're quite powerless. So to try and invest in yourself and try and dig deep and understand the issue is just, it just feels like it's going to fill you with dread, and it's going to make you understand and realize just how good you have it in the West, but just how bad other people have it in other parts of the world. And you don't really need that right now. You just about survived. You just about come over the other side of COVID. You've just about hung on. The last thing you need to do is put yourself down in the dumps with something that is quite clearly above most of our kind of understanding and realization of how the actual world works. So it's a really strange place to be in, but we make the best of it. We do what we can, and we try and put one foot in front of the other. Of course, this is a safe space for all that sort of stuff, so I'll try and keep that stuff to a minimum, because it's not really fun and it's not really interesting, especially because it's like ranting or raving about Brexit at a house party when you're high off ket or something. It's like, it's pointless. I mean, you're not going to say anything profound. Just move on. So I've been thinking recently, it just popped into my head the other day, about how sometimes in life you come across people who really make you question how you've approached life and your morals and your ethics and the way that and your integrity, and the way you view the world in general. They make you question it because they're so different. They're so foreign. They have such a different idea of how to navigate the world. They just make you question everything that you do. And one of those things that made me question what I did when I was younger growing up was liars, right? There was a lot of liars growing up when I was a kid. Maybe it was because, it was kind of pre-social media, so you could get away with lying a lot more. Or maybe it's because we're boys, naturally, we tell each other stories, we beat each other up, we try and race each other, we push each other, we try and see who can jump the highest. And maybe part of it, telling these tall tales, is maybe a way to you to ingratiate yourself within a friendship group full of boys. But I do remember specifically, there was this one kid in our group who used to lie about the weirdest things. Like, he used to lie about stuff like didn't make any sense, because it was a lie that you could quite quickly find out, but you're basically lying, right? You can't find out there's no truth to it. One good example was like computer games, right? Back in the day, I don't know if it's similar now because everyone's got access and they're probably readily available, but when I was younger, having like a Nintendo 64 or a PlayStation and stuff like that was, or even a Dreamcast back then, it required your parents to have a lot of disposable income for you to get that, and especially if you wanted to have each of the consoles, which a few of my friends did. They had a Sega, they had a Dreamcast, they had a PlayStation, they had Nintendo, they even had the handheld devices. You know what I mean? They were just insane. And then you look back on it and you think, oh, those kids are really rich. We didn't really know, because we lived in the same area. You always think you're in the same economic, socio-economic level, when really the neighbors that you have are, balling out of control. But that aside, there was this kid in our area that used to lie all the time about computer games, right? He used to lie and say he had all these consoles and whatnot, and he used to impress everybody, and everyone used to get hyped and whatnot, and we used to always say, oh, we can't wait until we go play, can't wait until we go play. And it wasn't like we were kind of egging to go to his house. That was just part and parcel of, life when you were that age, because online gaming didn't really exist. The only way you got to play with your friends is by inviting them into your house, and there's no fun in just having a PlayStation and playing it by yourself, especially if you're a single child, right? An only child, sorry. It just doesn't make any sense. So we were all kind of pushing to go in his house to try and play these computer games or these computer consoles, and it never materialized until the point where I had to break the news to everybody, because I managed to get into his house, and I managed to get in, through like a kind of happenstance, where I think we were outside of his little patio bit, and then his mum called for him to come in and get a sandwich, and she basically told me to come as well to get one too. And you could see the look of dread in his face when I had to go inside the house, because I think he didn't think anybody would actually step foot in his house. We stepped foot in his house. Obviously, he's got an amazing crib, wood floors and whatnot, nice coloured walls, picture frames everywhere. You've never seen picture frames before growing up in the hood. Nice leather chairs, like fluffy ones that you can look like no one bounces on them or lives on them. And then you go to see the bit where he keeps all his consoles, and there's only one. Don't get me wrong, it's a good PlayStation, but he didn't have all the other things that he spoke about. And he had limited games. I think he only had one controller. So the entire time that he was talking to us about having all these computer consoles was a complete lie. And now I'm pretty sure that guy that we spoke to when we were younger is probably super successful now. He probably works for, a Fortune 500, company somewhere. And it makes you really question sometimes in life, like, did he really lose, or did he really embarrass himself by being the loser? Because at that time, when we were that young, he gained all the social points, he got all the clout, he got all the ego boosts needed, all the pats on the back, all the big ups, because he told that lie when we were younger. Now, much later in life, he goes on to do other things. No one's going to remember that. No one's going to pull him up on the lie that he told. People are just going to allow him and let it go on. And it made me also think about comedians. Specifically, people like Brian Callen, who used to be on The Fire and the Kid, and a few others. There is a thing that happens in stand-up comedy. I'm not sure why. Well, I get it. It makes sense, because sometimes if you're a stand-up comedian and something happens to a situation, you want to tell, and it's a funny situation, but maybe there's not enough funny beats in it to make it a funny joke, because you're obviously on stage and you might only tell the joke for, let's say, anywhere between a minute and a half and maybe 5 minutes, maybe longer. You need to have a lot of funny beats to keep people engaged and hooked into the story. You can't just have a good story. It needs to be, especially if you're doing stand-up, it has to have some hooks, some funny bits in it where people can laugh or gasp, whatever it may be. So I understand the idea of maybe like, fluffing up your story, right? And maybe swapping out one beer for 7 beers. Maybe if she had on one high heel, maybe she didn't have any shoes on at all. That kind of thing it's an interesting part of it. But I've noticed, especially with Brian Cannon, he used to do this thing early on in The Fire and the Kid, where he'd just like flat out lie about situations or make it up or just repeat false stories because he felt like it was a funny one. And he did the thing where a lot of people do, which I think is a standard thing in conversations, but I think you notice it more in podcasts when you listen to them, where he did this thing where if somebody's telling a story, he'd want to tell one too, just so he could tell one, right? Whereas sometimes if you're actually having a conversation with your friends, you don't always try and one-up them with stories, right? If they're telling you something happened to them at work, you don't automatically relay with what happened to you at work that was much worse. You might just, you might try and feign emotion and maybe connect with them and say that's really fucked up, I can't believe he said that, or maybe try and dig in a bit. But you very rarely, if you're a good friend anyway and you actually listen to what people are saying, you don't really go in and try and one up every single story you have to your friends tell. But you notice it a lot on podcasts. There's a lot of one upping, and Brian Cannon is the king of that. He loves a good one up, and there's this weird exchange he has with his co-host on the, what's it called, Conspiracy Social Club, right? He's talking to Sam Tripoli and he kind of calls them out, which is quite good on it. But he speaks about lying, right? And it also made me think a little bit about LA when I went to LA, which I'll talk about on the other side. But listen to this clip of Brian Callen basically explaining or trying to justify compulsive lying in his eyes, and it's a bit strange, it's a bit of a bizarre clip, but just bear with me and I'll explain on the other side what I thought about LA when I went there.
In Africa, they've built Africa. So when you go across Africa, my friend just did that on a motorcycle. And that's not true. I don't have a friend that did it on a motorcycle. But for the story, my friend just did this on a motorcycle. And he was amazed.
That was so interesting.
I know. I'll just come up with somebody.
Why'd you catch yourself like that?
Because
Is this spiritual, Brian?
Because I just say stuff sometimes. And, and the truth is, I've read about people who've done that, and I do know someone who knows someone who did
that, dude.
So, but it's so much better when I say a good friend of mine,
because it's like words cost money. You don't want to spend a lot of cash.
It's the way I lie. I always say is when I said I used to get my coffee in the lobby of the World Trade Center. No, I didn't. I used to get my coffee at a stand that was about 100 yards or 50 yards away from the World Trade Center.
You and Steve Ranzizi should be doing a tour.
But I always said it because when I said that, I used to always want people to know how much it meant to me when those towers went down, because that was my city, and that was very.
So that basically I'll continue, but that is a good real place to pause, because that it basically explains the genesis of a liar, right? Because they feel as if they can justify their lie because it's more important that they insert themselves into whatever story they're telling to make themselves look better, right? Because he feels like he needs people to know how much it hurt him when the Twin Towers are attacked. So by inventing this lie that he got coffees back in the day in the lobby of the Twin Towers, it places him right center of that building. It gives him a connection. Maybe he was friendly with the barista. Maybe he went out with one of the baristas, right? That was his regular pass. That was his regular haunting ground, a place that he passed all the time in the morning to get a coffee, to go on his meetings, or to do his job that he was doing back in the day. I think he said he used to be like a, what's in sales on account or something, some sort of blue collar job that maybe his dad got him back in the day. But that maybe explains what a liar is doing. It's less so about it's maybe less about trying to impress you and more so about trying to make themselves sound more awesome, which is a really bizarre thing, especially if you think this man's like 50 plus years old. He's got 2 kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense why you'd want to be that desperate to impress people. But this might be a symptom again of LA. So let's keep it going.
That was
face it, Brian. You wanted to try to get a little pussy out of it too.
Well, I never got laid off of that because I would never be a war profiteer.
I used to get my call.
Look how you fidgets when people talk about women like that. Back in the day, this was Brian pre-rape allegations. He would have been a little bit more, he would have dug in. But with all the allegations, which is smart, he doesn't necessarily dance in these kind of topics because it kind of can come across weird, and you've got these things hanging over your head, and you're talking about how you like to creep on some of the girls that were serving coffee in the lobby of the Twin Towers, which wasn't the Twin Towers, but whatever.
I'll be there.
I just remember I said
a lot of baristas.
Yeah. There are lies, and then there are lies like that. So anyway, my dear friend, really good friend of mine, just went across Africa on a motorcycle. And one of the things that he was amazed about is that Tom is so good. And Africa Tom was so amazed that all the roads were so paved. They were so well paved. Well, why? And by the way, I did go to Africa, and I did see this, and I did talk to a lot of people about it who were from.
Brian is literally arguing with himself right now.
I know.
He's literally like, I got a friend Tom. Well, I actually went there. It's like you're debating yourself right now.
So Tom and I went to Africa, and I didn't see him there, but he was there too at the same time. And one of the things that I noticed that.
Anyway, that's basically the clip, but it made me also think about my brief time that I spent in LA a few years ago when I went to go for the Camp Flog Gnas rave festival thing, whatever Tyler Creator puts on. And one thing that you notice very quickly, especially if you move in those circles, because we went to, One Oak and a few other these kind of bougie places, is that quite quickly when people see you, they want to ascertain where you stand socially, what kind of clout you got, what sort of connections you've got, what can you do for them. And it's good in one way because it really kind of sorts out people that actually want to talk to you for talking to your sake, or people that want to just talk to you in terms of getting a connection. Because there's nothing worse with somebody trying to feign like they want to be your friend, but really you're trying to get to your other friend who they think is more popular or popping. So maybe that kind of fakeness is good. But I did see a lot of people, for the sake of conversation, just inventing things. And I didn't do it. I did the opposite. Whenever someone asked me in LA what I did, I just kept telling them I was unemployed, right? All the time. I just kept saying, I'm unemployed, I don't do nothing. I get benefits, I don't do anything, right? At that time, I was working a pretty decent job at the time, but I didn't mention it. And they automatically killed the conversation. They didn't want anything to do with me, which is, again, fine because it's transparent. But I think the kind of sad thing about it, the bad consequence, is that you end up being like a Brian Callen person who's like 50 plus years old, and you end up having to feel like you have to impress people during conversations, because part and parcel of Hollywood is auditioning, presenting yourself, showcasing. That's how you get jobs, right? You have to kind of tap dance in front of somebody, and then they think, you're the best tap dancer, let's get you in this, let's put a wig on you, and then suddenly you got this series, and then you're hoping that series gets syndicated, and then It's a whole game. But you're always performing. It's never like self-sufficient. It's never like you basically doing it for you or doing it for your small little crowd. You always want, even the biggest podcasters in LA are the same. They're not happy just having Bobby Lee and Tiger Belly is a good example. Tiger Belly is super popular. Bobby Lee is super funny. They got great cast of people they got on there, great guest, but he's still not happy or content with just having that. He still wants to get the love and the acclaim and whatever with Hollywood. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, a lot of trauma and whatnot tied to it because of the rejection, but there's something about that area, something about that part of the world that constantly puts people in that position, which is okay. But then in my point of view, from where I grew up, the guy that I was talking about in the beginning with the computer consoles, he had no excuse. We grew up in like East London, in Beckton somewhere, right? Like, he had no excuse to be lying that way because there was really nothing to gain. No one was trying to pick him for anything. He was set in life. So I think sometimes if you choose to lie in that kind of scenario, you're probably way more sicker in the head, but you're also probably going to get further in life, because it feels like nowadays lies are just part and parcel of the society we live in. Everyone's lying to you. Your government's lying to you. Scientific bodies at the moment are lying to you. Scientific organizations, when it comes to COVID, everyone's lying to some extent. No one's telling you really the truth, and you're having to kind of sift through and figure it out in your own regard. So sometimes maybe it is beneficial to just be lying and just try and fake it until you make it, and just stumble your way through a career, because being honest and standing on your morals and being principled and talking with some sort of clarity and thinking critically with things sometimes doesn't really bode well when you want to make it in popular culture or in the general public. There's something about it. Obviously, if you want to do your niche stuff, you're fine. But if you want the love and adoration of the general public, sometimes just inventing a story to make them laugh, inventing a narrative that makes them be captivated with you is probably a far better place to go. I don't know. Maybe that's just, I'm talking out my ass, but I thought about that today, about that kid. I was like, I wonder what happened to that kid that just unnecessarily lied about all the consoles he had. It was like, why did he say that? He knew we were going to find out. We're going to have to cross paths and go to your house, or something was going to happen where that lie was going to be rumbled. But he didn't care, because in that moment, he got all the clout, all the attention, all the love that he needed at that moment. And anything else after that was just is what it is. It was embarrassing, but it didn't change the fact that he got all the pats on the back prior. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there, but let me know what your best growing up lying stories are. I'd love to know them in the comments down below. Some of the best people that you grew up with in the world lying, or sometimes let me know actually stories of people that you didn't know at the time were lying, but you only found out later when you got older. You're like, hold on, that story didn't happen. But when you're younger, it sounds believable. You know what I mean? Like someone telling you, oh yeah, I got jumped by 10 boys and I beat all them up. Do you know what I mean? When you're 15 or only 15, when you're like 12, it sounds believable. When you grow up and you actually go to one flipping taekwondo class, you're like, hold on, fighting is way harder than that guy makes it seem. How did he beat up 10 people? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Next, of course, we have to talk briefly about Man United versus Southampton. We have to talk about that because, it's just been on my mind for the past couple of days, which is annoying. Once again, football does this to you, right? I think I've said it previously on this pod. I think I'm happy and glad I've got football in my life, because it's basically made me not be into politics, right? Because football, what it tells you is that most of the time, all your ranting and raving, you're hollering and you're protesting doesn't really do anything, right? Clubs just do what they want. They mismanage funds. They mismanage resources, they mismanage teams and squads and moments in history, managers, whatever, right? It's just a whole mismanagement. If you haven't got the right owners and the right structure, you're not really going to go anywhere, and there's nothing you can do until the right owners and managers come along. It just is what it is. You can't really force them into selling. There's loads of things that happens that are out of control, so it makes me a little bit more have a little bit more of a distance when it comes to politics. I don't get too heated over it, but still, it's emotional and it pulls at your heartstrings. And one of the good examples of it was the Southampton game, because after the first game of the season, United played Leeds and we thumped them 5-1. You could have forgiven that we were on our way to winning the quadruple, right? The United fan base was, singing from the top of their lungs, really looking optimistic, thinking we're finally going to click. It doesn't matter, we've got a shit manager, we're going to win because we've got all these best players playing for us. As long as he plays them, we'll be okay. then quite quickly we realised the game against Southampton is probably a far better representation of the teams we're likely to face this season than Leeds. Leeds, I think, are one of those games where you're either going to lose 5-1 or you're going to win 5-1. There is no middle ground with Leeds, right? And they basically play in our favour. They leave spaces behind. They mark one-on-one. You can pick them off on the counter, blah, 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 blah. With a team like Southampton that sits back and presses and uses their strikers or midfielders to press our defenders who probably aren't that great on the ball, we can't build from the back. They are made for us, especially when you consider that they've kind of been decimated, you know, in terms of their goal scoring ability with, you know, Danny Ings going to Aston Villa, their main goal scorer, and obviously bringing in that, is it Andy Robertson or something? Roberts, I forgot his name. What's his name? Get his name correct. Put some respect on it because he played really well. And is it Adam Armstrong? What's his name? Adam Armstrong or Andy Armstrong? Adam Armstrong. Yeah, obviously with replacing Adam Armstrong, he's still kind of unproven. He came obviously from Blackburn, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So there's still a lot to go there. But in general, if you sit back against United, you're probably going to get a lot of luck. And that's what we saw in this game. It started off pretty tetchy. I thought United played pretty poorly in the first half, probably came good in the second half. Pogba maybe might have been the best player, maybe Greenwood, maybe De Gea to a certain extent, although some of the saves were a little bit shaky. But overall, it was really a game of Southampton basically taking their chance, one of their chances, United basically missing a few, and then not having the ability to create more, right? We didn't actually create or carve them open much as we probably should have when you consider how poor of a team they are and the likelihood that they'll probably finish just outside the relegation zone. So that's majorly one of the most concerning things. But one of the other concerning things with United, that team, is just you look at it and you look at yourself and think, okay, forget the forward line, forget how they put, you know, they're organized, you know, the strikers and the midfielders, just forget it for one moment. There is a big disconnect with the goalkeeper and the defense, I think, still at the moment, because it quite clearly, there is even though I don't think the style of play is great, there is a style of play in terms of us wanting to build up from the back and maybe use our wing backs in terms of pushing up further in the pitch and getting the ball to our better players and then springing attacks, less touches, blah, blah, 1-2 touch finishes in the box, cool. But our defenders aren't really suited to build up from the back, right? De Gea isn't really known for his ability to play with the ball at his feet. Luke Shaw needs a lot of encouragement to get up that left-hand side. Even though he's played okay, he still needs a lot of encouragement. If you don't really encourage and push him or put him in a position where he has to run up and down, he just tends to kind of revert back to type a little bit and be a bit timid, even though he's got great ability. Maguire isn't that great on the ball. Lindelof is okay on his day, but again, on his day. And Aaron Wan-Bissaka is, of course, fairly average, improving, but fairly average on the ball. So you've got a lot of players in there with a lot of question marks at the back. Let's say Luke Shaw's the only one that can play out from the back, but the rest of them, which is the majority, 4 of their players, 4 of the back 5, not really the best when it comes to playing at the back, which means it's hard to get the ball to these 2 defensive midfielders or centre midfielders playing there, which is then difficult to get the ball further up to these guys, which is why it's no real coincidence that the players at the front who are maybe have a better first touch and are able to basically pass the ball to, 5 yards, 10 yards to the player in front of them, get more touches of the ball in those kind of forward areas than they do over here, because the ball doesn't really travel that far from here to here or from the defense to the midfield. It kind of takes a while to get there, and that's one of the concerning things about Oli in that sense, because it's quite clear watching us play, we can't play, or we don't play out from the back well. If that's the case, why don't we just try and play long? We're suited to it. We've got a lot of players who can play in that position long, who can maybe bring the ball down. Martial, for all these errors, is still fairly good with his back to goal. He can pin a defender back. Pogba's obviously got the height. We've got players that can play there or that can do that football a lot easier, because at the moment the building up from the back just isn't working. So just get the ball further up the pitch. And you saw the kind of disconnect and the real weird tactics and system we have in our team with Jadon Sancho when he came on. He was a bit lost. He didn't really know what he was doing. He was going on the right, going on the left. He came into the middle, just trying to get the ball. There was no real clear idea on what we've been practicing in training in terms of utilizing him. It feels like a lot of our fan base also just watched these highlights and thought he's just going to be like Ronaldo in 06-08 and just kind of run with the ball and carry it 40 yards and then skip past a few players and bury it in the top corner. That's not really his game. He can do that, of course, but he's more similar to like a Martial than he is to an Mbappe. Do you know what I mean in that regard? In terms of like carrying the ball, further up the pitch on his own, just sprinting up and down. That's not necessarily what he does. At the moment, we don't really seem to have an idea what we're gonna do in terms of that kind of style of play. It doesn't really make any sense. And again, there's so much kind of wrong with how we play with the players we have at the moment that it just makes me think at the moment that all this conversation, this Gary Neville spoke earlier about we need Harry Kane and all this stuff. It feels like a big distraction. We don't really talk about tactics when it comes to United. We don't really talk about systems. We don't really talk about if we're getting the best out of the players we have available. We don't really talk about if the tactics were right or formation was right in the previous game or the selection was right. It's always a talk about signatures. And don't get me wrong, Harry Kane's obviously an upgrade to Martial. It's obviously going to be an upgrade to Edison Cavani. But for people to think that suddenly Harry Kane signing is going to take us from where we are, how we're playing, to suddenly the next level, it's just insane. He needs someone to pass in the ball. He can't pick up the ball from DM and just score goals on his own. He needs somebody to cross the ball. He needs someone to thread him through. And we don't really do that at the moment with the players we have. I think Martial got like less than 15 touches. And again, he played terrible. He was diabolical. For somebody who is quite clearly has his position under threat with Edison Cavani, even though he's like, a flipping granddad, he should be a lot more on it than what he is, and he wasn't. Fair play. But still, we don't get the ball to these guys. Do you know what I mean? Like, Lingard came on, and did he touch the ball more than 10 times? I don't really know. So those are all question marks, in my opinion, that are just still lingering over the heads of this team at the moment. And it feels like if all the other teams get their act together, Liverpool look good, Virgil van Dijk looks like he hasn't missed a step. And if this continues and we don't see the implosion of Liverpool like we did last season, Chelsea continue to build on what they did last season too. Man City obviously keep doing what Man City does. It's hard to see us or to see this team finishing ahead of those three teams. And I said before, if Solskjaer does manage to finish in front of Klopp, Pep and Tuchel, he definitely, regardless of position, he deserves to win Manager of the Year award, 100%. Or maybe, if flipping... what's his face? The manager for Norwich manages to keep Norwich up because they look pretty terrible. They look like they're a bit short for the league. If he manages to keep them up, maybe he deserves the manager of the year trophy, which I think it sometimes does go too often to teams in the top four, when sometimes I think it may be a better achievement or a far greater achievement to get a team to survive in the Premier League, especially if you're like a Brentford or a Norwich and stuff, than it maybe is for Man United to finish top four, considering how much they spent. But in terms of the managerial coaching ability of those other three guys in Tuchel, Klopp and Pep, if Solskjaer can finish ahead of those guys comfortably, considering there's no implosion, there's no Virgil van Dijk getting injured for half the season and Liverpool having to play flipping Fabinho and whoever in centre back, if everyone kind of stays the same and most of their best players stay fit, he deserves a real big award in that regard. But I just don't see it happening. And I think this game, because for all the toxicity that's happened, most people in here don't really give a shit about Man United Twitter, but Man United Twitter the other day, especially yesterday, even today, was on fire. People arguing, calling each other names, debating about this, taking little screen grabs and videos of people's flipping match reviews. And in general, it feels like the fan base is really divided and split. And I think a lot of it has to come from there's a quiet realization. Everyone's kind of had that we're not where we need to be, and it's going to take us, especially if you think Ollie's the guy, it's going to take us a lot more signings, maybe 5, for us to get to the point where we're challenging. And at the moment, do we think that the Glazers are going to sanction 5 more signings after we just signed Varane, after we just signed Sancho? After Bruno came previously before that, Pogba record sign that, it just doesn't make any sense really. If you think the Glazers are going to, sign that off in terms of a checkbook, but if he manages to secure top 4, Ollie will be here for a very, very long while, because the history of United shows that unless we finish outside the top 4, he's not going to go anywhere. And if that's the case, then we have to just strap in and basically hold on tight and hope that somewhere along the line he does what most people think he cannot do, figures it out and manages to win us a league or a trophy. I still think this season maybe the best hope at the moment is probably finishing with a trophy. Top 4 should be a given with the money spent. I don't think that should be much of an achievement, in my opinion. Not sure if everyone agrees, but I think a trophy is actually the thing that needs to be done for I think the collective confidence of the team, for Oli to have a belief in what he's doing, for the players to obviously have belief in what the manager's doing also, because I'm sure behind the scenes, as the fans are speaking about this stuff, I'm sure the players are divided too in terms of if they think he's the guy or not, especially when you consider what the difference a manager like Tuchel did obviously to Chelsea when he came halfway through the season. There's clear evidence that, you know, good managers do make a difference. Maybe, you know, you could say Chelsea's team is better, organization regardless, but there is, you know, you can't deny that they do add something, whether it's 5% or less than that or more than that is whatever. You can argue with your mum about that, but in general, it will be interesting to see what happens in the season. I'm just interested to see whether or not, my personal thing is that I just want to see the experiment. I want to see whether or not it's possible for a fairly average manager to win the league with great players. Or with really good players. Maybe not great, I say really good. I want to see if that's possible. So far, we haven't necessarily seen evidence of it. We've seen average coaches, Roberto Di Matteo, obviously, with Chelsea, the Champions League. We've seen, you know, be able to win trophies because it's a cup competition and they're one-off games. But can you win the league, right? 38 games a season. People always say where you finish in the league is where you deserve to finish. It's a clear indication of where you are. Cool. Can you win the league, or can you come close to challenging with having a fairly average coach? I really want to see the experiment. It happens, and if not, then I guess that proves that we just need more players. And unfortunately, with the Glazers, we're never going to sign 5 players all at once. It's not going to happen. We'll maybe sign 1, maybe 2 at best. If that's the case, how many more windows do we need? Is it 3? Is it 4? Like, how long does this take? It just feels odd. But hey, what can you do? And then I spoke at the top of the show about the vibes being off, about there being something odd in the scene at the moment in the air. I've seen it a lot with video clips of people going raving. It just doesn't look the same. Places aren't as full as they probably should be. Even some of the more decadent, debauchery-laden parties like Inferno and stuff that are usually on fire and look absolutely incredible. There's still too much space in the dance floor, it feels like, for me. Not enough panting, not enough sweat dripping from the camera. And basically, it might be due to the fact that we've got less tourists around and we all kind of underestimated the impact and the influence that tourists have in terms of our nightlife and our night scene. Without them, we can't really pack our places really in general. I don't really know, or maybe because people's appetites for recreational activities have changed since COVID. People have maybe taken up sewing, woodwork, and gone on to other interests, or basically decided to impregnate their partners, moved away. I don't know. Something's definitely changed. The vibes are definitely off. And this great article here from The Atlantic speaks about it a little bit in a far more eloquent way than I could. So it says, it's August and no one knows what kind of summer it is, written by a girl called Caitlin Tiffany. And it says the following. You wouldn't remember this, but at the end of June, I was honestly on a dance floor, under a disco ball, shoulder to shoulder with sweaty strangers, most of whom were singing Dancing Queen. And we were all vaccinated against the coronavirus, so we were nervous enough to say, do you think this is okay? But not nervous enough to leave. It was hot vax summer. Just like we were promised when that first big night out of the house resulted in a step first diagnosis, I didn't find it ominous at all. No, it was cute. 2 days of antibiotics and I was ready to get drunk on the 4th of July. Just a few weeks later, New York City was counting more than 1,000 COVID-19 cases, and the primary topic of conversation in my social circle had to turn to the seasons shifting vibes. The city's energy was some suggested, unsettling and weird. There were rumors of a quote-unquote gay cold circulating at Pride events, and then through a holiday cluster in Princeton, Massachusetts. New York's government starting offering $100 bribes to get vaccinated, and its appeals took on a more desperate pitch. Over the span of a single week, Mayor Bill de Blasio went from touting the summer of New York City and rejecting the idea of new mask mandates to acknowledging that the Delta variant had changed the game. Meanwhile, his office was planning to host a massive homecoming concert. If the hot vax summer hasn't yet been cancelled, it's certainly under threat. With 7 weeks to go until the start of fall, we've been presented with an urgent and confusing question. What kind of summer is it now? Every year since the advent of social media, April and May have been the times to discuss plans for one's summer aesthetic and create summer mood and vision boards in preparation. Then the summer gets a name and an anthem. Year was the summer of X. When the song of the summer, it was Y. Hot Vax Summer is a play on the Hot Girl Summer, the dominant meme of 2019, a year you might be able to recall if you were recently watching an old season of reality television. Summer 2021 seemed slippery, though even before the Delta surge began. From the first start, it was weighed down with too much significance and too many narratives, too much rushing to live too many different ideas on normal life. The mood was, if not manic, careening. Lord, whom most people hadn't seen or heard from in 4 years, delivered a creepy beach bacchanal in early June. Another song from the same album that the sleepiest anti-hot vax summer lyrics I can personally imagine. My body's been burning so many summers now, it's time to cool down. Meanwhile, brands set about their business. Old Navy ads from mid-July featured masterless families traveling wherever they wanted, including the indoor public spaces, and doing choreographed dances together, declaring a hot fam summer, which sounded disgusting but looked pretty fun. This commercial was driving me up the wall, a Reddit commentator wrote 2 weeks later. It's always on. Why does Old Navy have people dancing around like we're not in the end of the very commercial now? Brock Coyler, the New York Times party reporter who's been documenting Hot Vax Summer in New York City with Weekly Comment, told me that the Pride Party at the Standard in the last week of June, at which Madonna performed, was a pinnacle of summer we were supposed to have. You can see just how packed it was on Instagram. He said, "It's particularly a good party for people at how the mood changed around Delta. People were smoking together and swinging from the same bottle of alcohol in very small closed door spaces. That was definitely one of those events where in the days after, a ton of people were saying that they weren't feeling well. Now going 20 something and talking about having a kind of existential disappointment at the return of masks and social distancing." Coyler said that they're still at it, and the Hot Vax Summer magazine column will play out in the end. Everywhere you look, there's another summer happening. Writing in New York City, Kayo Katcher describes the main character energy among young people who want to reclaim control of their stories. One woman I follow on Twitter but don't really actually know called this the summer of refusing to investigate further. Agree with that one. Another dubbed it the repenting girl summer because I need so much grace and mercy. I have no idea what any of these people are talking about. I've seen an armpit girl summer, also unexplained. Pinched by a crab summer, okay. Even the definition of hot girl summer has become completely indecipherable. Lately, people have started insisting that this year's hot girls are different from 2019 hot girls in that they all have amnesia or irritable bowel syndrome and love tinned fish, which is the hot girl food again. What? I, for one, have been enamored by the idea of DFW summer, referring to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But the writer David Foster Wallace, where there was this TikTok of a guy in a bandana, to which the first reply was this David Foster Wallace summer. On Instagram, an account called Infinite Gesticulars, which started counting down to DWF summer in May, reposted a TikTok of a girl in a slicky bandana standing on the edge of a crowded pool, zooming in on half different girls in silky bandanas, regretting the fact that they all looked like every other bitch. DFW summer seems to be just about bandanas mostly, but I like the concept of this tweet from early June. It's DFW summer, it's sincerity summer, it's post-cringe summer. The precise meaning of the summer depends even more than usual this summer on each person's geography, risk tolerance, age, sense of their own importance. But one definition of summer really lands. On July 23rd, the publicist Michael Lieberman tweeted a photo of Philip Seymour Hoffman grimacing at the back of a boat, drink in hand, American flag in the background, a screenshot from the 1999 murder movie The Talent Mr. Ripley, and captioned it, "It's summer of uncertain vibes." 26,000 likes. Of course, the summer 2021 is a summer of not knowing what the summer is, of what label could possibly be appropriate. Some may still be trying to have a good time, but no one is entirely at ease. When I messaged Lieberman to ask about his caption, he responded fittingly with statements posed as questions. I just think people expected a crazy summer, and we all kind of approached it cautiously in the end. Not disappointment as much as ambivalence. That sounds right. And it's true. That is definitely it. It definitely is. It's the summer of certain vibes, and I think we all feel it deep down. We all know that's the case, but all these raves and parties I've been going to, it feels like people are trying to pretend they're having a good time. They're trying to pretend that everything's okay and that, the world isn't on fire, and there aren't, people around the world who are suffering in unmanageable ways, and people who, even at our home base, our neighbors and friends who haven't recovered from whatever damage the virus caused earlier on. And it just feels weird, right? But unfortunately, the only real way to kind of navigate, I feel like, and to kind of get over this hump and try and come out of it the other side is to maybe be a bit ambivalent, is to somehow be a little bit ignorant, is to be a little bit hot girly with it and be a little bit, head in the clouds and not really pay attention to it, because what else can you do? What real difference can you or I make to the situation? How are we actually going to change things? We're not really. So the best possible way to change things is maybe to change your mood in the hope that your mood can affect others, and that would affect others, and then you have this ripple effect. But in terms of influencing anything else, foreign policy, homelessness, right? Like, misallocation of government funds, all these things that are white, permeant things that we should obviously be trying to change, but we're just powerless. We can just about convince our family and friends who, aren't anti-vax to wear masks. I mean, how much more are we going to try and change foreign policy? We just can't do it. We cannot do it. And maybe parties at the moment aren't necessarily the vibe and they're not working, but they might be the only way out. Restaurants or going to bars and stuff, anything that doesn't involve having to kind of focus it and concentrate on the horrors of everyday life, that might be the only way out. It might really be the only way out. I don't really know, but I've definitely felt that summer of uncertain virus, and part of me again thought it was because of the lack of tourists that we have here in London. We missed out on that kind of energy and that vibe because, people, again, we discount the importance that those guys bring to nightlife. And I've always argued that they're actually the most important people that we kind of discount are the normies, the average square kind of individuals who just go on a night out because they want to unwind and let loose, but they don't necessarily know too much about the music or who's playing. They kind of contribute to the packing out of places. And I think nowadays, if you just have a whole rave full of chin strokers, it just doesn't have the same sort of energy, the same sort of power, or just a room full of people that are in the scene. It just doesn't hit the same. And maybe that's where we're at the moment. I don't really know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm seeing it a different way. But from what I've seen and where I've been, it just isn't right at the moment. And I think this article definitely captures it the best. So it's from The Atlantic. It's called August, and no one knows what kind of summer it is. I'll put the link in the description if you want to check it out yourself. It's definitely a good article to have a little butchers of. Talking about a summer of uncertainty, the other day was Tesla AI Day, and Elon Musk decided quite jokingly to unveil one of the most crazy things I've ever seen, and something that I think maybe in yesteryear, maybe a pre-COVID year, might have caused more of a ripple effect, but because people are just about struggling to pay rent and keep the lights on and put food on their table and clothes on their kids' back, they don't really give a shit about a Tesla bot, but they should probably care about it because it's going to affect people in ways that we don't really consider at the moment, or we haven't really considered at the moment. So this headline's from CNET. It says Elon Musk unveils Tesla bot, a humanoid robot that uses vehicle AI. It says the following: Tesla CEO Elon Musk on Thursday unveiled a humanoid robot called the Tesla bot that runs on the same AI used by Tesla's fleet of autonomous vehicles. A functioning version of the robot didn't make an appearance during the Musk reveal, though a slightly bizarre dance by a performer dressed like a Tesla bot did. And that nearly caught me off guard. I watched the entire thing. I had it on in the background. I was dipping in and out, and then towards the end, he announces, or he kind of wants to unveil this new thing, and you see this flipping robot guy come out, or guy or girl, and kind of walk like a robot a little bit, and then quite quickly you realize when they start dancing, it's a humanoid. It's a humanoid. But it was quite scary. You're thinking, nowhere has this guy built a fucking working prototype already. You're like, Jesus. It says here, the unexpected reveal came at the end of Tesla's AI Day presentation, with Musk providing few details about the slightly creepy slender man-like robot beyond a few PowerPoint slides. The 5'8" robot is expected to weigh in about 125 pounds, be built from lightweight materials, he said. Its head will be kitted out with an autopilot camera used by the Tesla vehicles to sense the environment, and will contain a screen for displaying information. Internally, it will be operating the Tesla's full self-driving computer. He said it's intended to be friendly and navigate through the world like humans. The robot appearance came after a 90-minute presentation detailing some of the artificial intelligence upgrades. Free slide detailing the robot's proposed specification. Musk made sure to point out that you could both outrun the Tesla bot and overpower it. He has in the past rallied against the use of robots as weapons and warned of the risk of AI might pose, once calling it the biggest risk of the race in civilization. I guess if they're incredibly slow, easy to power robots, the dangers are reduced. Very true. He said he should be worried about AI. Musk reiterated during the presentation and answer the session. The presentation, he said, what we're trying to do here at Tesla is make AI useful for people, and people love, and is unequivocally unequivocally good. One particular side about the Tesla bot would eliminate dangerous and repetitive boring jobs is the most important part, and Musk provided an example suggesting that the robot could be told to go to the store and get the following groceries. Not that such a task is particularly dangerous, but you might find it repetitive and boring. Musk, prone to making bold statements about the future, riffed a little on how he envisions Tesla bot changing the work too. He says, "This I think will be quite profound. Essentially, in the future, physical work will be a choice. If you want to do it, you can, but you need to, but you won't need to do it. It's hard to say this." So yeah, so that was obviously the major part of it, right? In terms of getting rid of boring, manual, repetitive labor. And it oddly made me think of the 4-hour work week and why I think the 4-hour work week gets a really bad rap. Tim Ferriss's monumental book, a book that I've read cover to cover maybe 7 times. I took a couple copies with me to Nicaragua and left them in a hostel that I stayed in. You know, the kind of libraries that you use where you basically take a book and leave a book for like a traveler coming behind you. And I thought, in my opinion, it was maybe one of the greatest books in terms of preparing us for the future of whatever we're in there now, where it comes to fulfilled by Amazon, whether it comes for drop shipping, whether it comes for people doing real estate, whether it comes to people doing consulting online, being influencers. It's basically what the world has basically turned into now at the moment, where people are trying their darndest to get out the conventional 9 to 5 because it allows them more freedom to do the things they enjoy. And maybe to a lesser degree, the fact that we've moved to a remote working kind of culture at the moment with COVID specifically, where you can effectively work from anywhere in the world as long as you've got internet connection, it makes the need for you to work kind of boring, repetitive, manual labor jobs less. But obviously, if you need to work those jobs and that's the only thing you're qualified on, you need to somehow supplement that wage or supplement that loss of income. And obviously, that's where universal basic income comes in, where essentially the government steps in and basically provides you with something more than universal credit than we have here. You'll probably get more than that. You'll probably get somewhere close to about 1,500, whatever average you need in terms to living a somewhat alright life in London, covering your rent and making sure you have a little bit of money to spend. And then everything else you do on top of it will be just for pure joy, enjoyment, vocation, or maybe to top up your skills or add a bit of money to your account. But it's not necessary for you to work. For instance, you could have a universal basic income and maybe still be a bartender in a club because you want to be in that environment. But, you know, having to rely specifically on a bartender's salary, living in London will just be too much. I mean, you have to have maybe 3 or 4 jobs on the go to make that work. So that's where universal basic income comes. So that's where this is scary. And then you look at it, you know, you zoom out a little bit and you think about what Elon Musk and what he wants to do with SpaceX and try and make humans a multiplanetary species and effectively make us colonize Mars. Then you think of how you could use those robots in terms of setting up and building infrastructure before humans actually get there, making sure you're preventing unnecessary loss of life. You look at it again, you expand it, you think of the robot taxis that they were possibly trying to do, and there was a lot of roadblocks that came in the way of that, and cars imploding or running into stoplights, whatever it may be. Maybe having a humanoid robot form inside the driver's seat that can overtake and basically that can basically take over if the car does get into a bit of a kerfuffle. That might be a thing, and then you basically take that robot and extend it onto maybe the Tesla semis. That could be something as well. You know, there's a whole big scope for it, but for sure what it does take away the need to have real humans work in factories, in paying them wages, allowing them to have breaks. Look at all the controversy with Amazon and having people pissing in bottles in factories and stuff. If Jeff Bezos can get away with having an Amazon fulfillment center be staffed majority by humanoids or by these kind of Tesla bots that basically just work, then he would definitely do that. But then again, you're taking the possibility of people that work those jobs and support their family away from them, so you have to supplement it. So it's a crazy thing to see. It's pretty incredible. I like the fact that it actually looks like a human. It's a bit different to the Boston Dynamic robots they have at the moment that look a little bit freakishly like kind of these weird animatronics kind of things. I quite like it's got like a physical human form in that regard. I'm really curious to see if they are able to make a working prototype. It's all well and good having these PowerPoints and slides, but one thing that we do know about Tesla, or we do know about Elon in general, even though he doesn't maybe ship stuff when they should, he does tend to like to present working prototypes or things that are close to working. So maybe in terms of the disruption it may cause and the fact that he's controversial, he didn't want to prevent it. I don't really know, but I wouldn't doubt that they could put together a working prototype that would blow our flipping socks off. But it's quite scary. I think no one can argue that it's not scary. No one can argue that it's not going to take away a huge swath of employment and jobs out there. But unfortunately, this is where the future is heading, in it, and we all have to kind of strap on and get involved, or be left in the doldrums. That's what I think. But hey, what do I know? Next on the list we have this article courtesy of Mixed Mag. Dave Clarke is still talking about plague raves. I don't know why. Maybe it's like, maybe it's in media. When you find something like a niche, people that want to talk to you about something, you just continually talk about it because you don't think people give a shit about when it comes to you, and then you hope that the conversations around those hot button topics, you can then segue that into the stuff that you're doing. But it never really works that way, right? People just are going to come to you for your COVID or plague rave hot takes, and they're just going to leave. They're not going to buy your EP. They're probably not going to bother going to your event. So I don't know. My opinion. It says here, in an up-and-coming interview, Dave Clarke has shared his views on artists who have played sets across the world during pandemic. He shared them all the time. Every time he shared them, anytime he has opportunity, whether it's on Facebook or whatever, he's sharing them. And at the moment now, I don't care. Do you care? Probably not. I think we already know where those people's positions are. We already know their moral compass and what they want to do. They did it. They haven't really been punished in that sense. They've kind of gone on to play many different events henceforth, and it is what it is. It's unfair. It's not really the best thing you want to see. It's not really safe, blah, blah, blah. Cool, but it is what it is. So it's just kind of boring to keep complaining about these things when they quite clearly aren't going to change. No one wants to change them, and it is what it is. Anyway, it continues. Chatting to Faith Fanzine, Clarke labelled the shows repugnant. He said, artists that make 20 to 100,000 a show, that have no financial worries whatsoever, but need the narcissistic attention, that is repugnant. Completely against the ethos and the ethics of how we founded all this. Commenting on the recent wave of illegal parties that have swept through the UK and Europe, Clarke said plague raves are disgusting, and anyone taking a backseat of the illegal parties is unforgivable. The interview was conducted as part of a new issue of Faith featuring Royce and Murphy on the cover, and exclusive interviews with Lauren Garnier, Natasha Diggs, and Dave Clarke, the 52-year-old Techno affiliate, who has nicknamed the Baron of Techno. Might as well call him the flipping Stalin of Techno at this point. By BBC's John Peel told Faith, I would not have a recording recreated photo for John Peel. Definitely RIP John Peel, the absolute legend. Clarke also commented on the lack of credit given to black people in the creation of techno. This is definitely one of those, he's doing that Bottega Veneta thing, isn't it? He's kind of look at it, like sometimes I think the what's the thing called, the pandering to black people after the George Floyd thing is insane, because it's good to see, don't get me wrong, this cover, right, any on a cover here, 2 cover stories, it's awesome, you like to see it, but it just feels a little bit disingenuous, right? I don't know, like maybe it's a bit different conversation about whether it matters if it's disingenuous because you want to see representation regardless, but it just feels like these platforms that were, falling over themselves to feature another flipping benign interview with flipping Disclosure and Michael Bibi have now suddenly changed, and they want to cover all these creative and incredible artists because they have Menelin, do you know what I mean? And they didn't really care about them a couple of years ago. It's just a little bit disingenuous, but it's what it is. Even Clarke is talking about it. Clarke, techno has its roots in black music, and some would argue that Kraftwerk too, but generally the movement is black movement. I think techno started to become too around 2004, and it's lost its roots there. What have you done for it, mate? Have you done anything to change it, how it's been perceived? Like, it's just bullshit. Anyway, whatever. Moving back on. I think the main point here is true. That's the only thing that I'm interested in, because I think the idea of a plague rave and people going, I think makes sense, especially at the height of COVID. There was nothing but negativity and misery on the news, people dying left, right, and center. Most, I think, or the general human kind of reaction or emotion is there may be empathy, of course, in terms of feeling how people, feeling sad for people that are losing family members, but there's also a part of you that wants to maybe ignore and try and bury your head in the sand. I think those are probably the 2 strongest reactions people have to that kind of news. You either want to learn everything you can about it and immerse yourself in it and warn all your friends about all the dangers of going outside, or you want to purposely try and ignore it as much as possible because it's just too miserable to look at day to day. So I get why people go. Cool. The one that interests me the most is the artists performing. As Dave Clarke pointed out here, the ones that are performing on stage, because for the most part, the majority of plague raves didn't really feature towards the end. There were a lot of kind of underground DJs playing plague raves towards the end of time, taking advantage of certain countries having laxer rules around people gathering, parts of Eastern Europe and Central Europe. People from Berlin played a lot of these raves, but no one said nothing because they're their friends, cool, whatever. But it's easy to pick out the Solomons and the Michael Bibis and the Seth Trucklers and the Jamie Jones, or maybe stuff that we know I'm talking about. All those, it's easier because they're glitzy and they're a little bit show offy. But I'm interested to know. I would love to sit down or to get Sven or one of these guys and just ask them like really like an honest question, because we know more often than not, because I think the one we realized was Matthew Plex. Somebody I think allegedly leaked Matthew Plex's fee when he played at a festival somewhere, and I think if I'm not mistaken, it was like 30,000 or something, right? And then you go to the Peggy U thing at Nike. People were hypothesizing that was around 10. I don't know, but we know generally if you're like a high ticket, like a normie DJ, like of choice that people like a Peggy, like a Masher Plex, like a Jamie Jones, like a Martinez Brothers, you're probably per gig gonna get played anywhere between 10 grand to 50 grand, most likely, right? And the fact that most people coming up, myself included, you probably always start at 50 or 100 and then you just kind of pounds, right? And then you kind of go up from there. Hopefully you put out a tune, you get more famous, whatever, something happens, and then you kind of slowly but surely go up. But you know where you started from. You know your humble beginnings. You know how you basically got by on that. So something makes me think, like a lot of these guys, some of them don't have families, some of them don't really see their families. Why they'll be in a position where they need to play these raves if they've kind of had 5+ years of getting a minimum of 10 grand per show, and most of them play all summer long, sometimes all winter long. It just made it really funny to see the people that were playing the most, who were out there trying to quote unquote put food on their table for their family, were the ones that had the most means. But the ones that were struggling, and most of the ones that didn't really have any ability to play these players, because most of the promoters were trying to put on events that would sell out and get people to buy tickets and to buy drinks and all this stuff. So we understand it, but I would love to know. That's the one thing I would really like to ask a question of for these guys. Like, can you just like explain to me? You don't need to explain because it's their business, no one gives a shit, but it's just, I would just be curious to find out like why Nina Kravis is playing in the desert with these random people standing in hula hoops and shit. Like, why are you doing that? Like, do you know what I mean? You were just at Coachella the other day. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Do you actually need this, or is it more of a, as Dave Clarke said, is it a narcissistic thing where they just need that attention? I remember someone saying that to me once, where I was at an after hours somewhere. One guy I was talking to about DJs and the scene and stuff. He was like to me, "Yeah, man, you just don't get it, man. I've been around these guys. I've been in green rooms with these people. They're not like you and I. We might like to have a mix or two and go and play in a couple of raves, but for these guys, like, it's their, like, they kind of can't breathe without standing in front of that stage and getting that endorphin rush and having that adulation be poured on them. They need it to breathe." And I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe that does explain why Solomon's going to play 6 hours in Pasha and then go 6 hours in some random person's Airbnb and then another 8 somewhere else. It's like, he probably has a family. He probably has people that want to see him and stuff, but he doesn't, this is all I'm doing. So maybe there's something part of it, but I don't really know. Who knows? But, Dave Clarke needs to just move on from the playground thing. It is what it is. No one really cares anymore, man. I don't know. We have other things to worry about at the moment than rich DJs playing in rich venues for rich people in, dilapidated environments. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. What else do we have here? Talking about good stuff and good news. This is good news courtesy of RA. It says Berlin courts rules that a ban on indoor dancing cannot apply to vaccinated, recently recovered people. Like, we really have it good in London, innit? We don't really understand how bad it is in other places. I think, was it Holland? They got people protesting. People in Australia are actually going crazy about the crazy lockdown stuff they have going on there, especially when you consider the fact that they've got deaths in the single digits. It's just crazy to lock an entire country off that. But again, not my business. I'm not getting involved in politics. But just in terms of, what we've been able to enjoy for the past couple of months or so, we have dance floors, we can rave indoors, we can rave outdoors, but for the majority of the time, Berlin people have still been only able to rave in places that have, quote unquote, open their spaces. And now Berlin courts have ruled that you can dance indoors, which is good, but obviously only if you're vaccinated or you can show a negative test, I think. But anyway, so the article says the following: Berlin's ban on indoor dancing has been repealed for now when it comes to vaccinated people or people who are recently recovered from COVID. As RBB reports, the court ruled today that the city's COVID-19 rules were fair and sensible, but likely to be disproportionate when it comes to people who have been vaccinated or recently recovered. From now, that means that the ban on indoor dancing has been lifted, which is amazing. though exclusively for people who fall into these two camps. Negative COVID test results would not be enough to circumvent the indoor dancing ban, because people who have been vaccinated or already have the disease would not have the proper protection against the infection or the potential spread. The decision comes after the venue owners sued the government over the COVID-19 rules. Oh yeah, true. Was that a Wild Renate person? I remember reading that, right? A venue owner sued the government over it. Today's court decision can still be appealed at the higher administrative court of Berlin-Brandenburg. So interested to see whether or not this does actually get put into place. And I wonder if it's like a thing about venues seeing who's going to blink first, because maybe if you're a kind of bigger, high profile place, you don't want to be the first to put on indoor events, even though this has been ruled. You might want to wait for someone else to go first. But I'm interested to see who moves first, who blinks, what place opens up indoors, because as great as those outdoor open air spaces are, the reason why they're amazing is because they're a good kind of partner or companion to indoor places. It's quite nice to be able to go to like a proper club and then also go to like a city foss or something, even though it's not open air, but you know what I mean, right? It's good to go have that kind of contrast and have those kind of marriages and those abilities to go to different places. And without the indoors, it's just that's a thing that I don't really envy, honestly. So I'm thankful I don't live there at the moment, because imagine going there specifically for the nightlife and specifically for all the beauty that brings, and then it being taken away from you for the best part of a year. Do you know what I mean? Especially indoors, right? It's all well and good. You know, I've heard people booking Airbnbs and putting on raves that way and doing, you know, underground stuff and going in underground bunkers and all this malarkey. Cool, it's fun, but the whole reason why that place is cool is because you're able to go to these amazing, incredible clubs that people take real care in curating and programming and having the best people play and the best people working, blah, blah, blah. Without that, it just doesn't feel the same, innit? It's probably like, what's the point of living there if you don't have that? Of course, there's other bits you can discover and you can maybe fall in love with the city all over again in a different way, but part of that place, the heartbeat of it is the techno, the heartbeat of it is the clubs. And without that ability to go indoors somewhere in the clandestine black environment with, you know, dark rooms everywhere and stuff, it just doesn't really ring the same way. So I'm curious to see who blinks first. I'd love to see Berghain put up a program soon, hopefully ended this month for September. Maybe we might see them open up certain floors and stuff. That'd be absolutely epic, and maybe it'll be the only way a lot of people will be able to get in, because there'll probably be less tourists traveling around the world, I would assume. And maybe if there's only allowing people to go in that are vaccinated, again, that also prevents people from going. Or maybe they will even go further and say you have to bring a proof of vaccination and a negative test. That would be insane. They did that. Or like a PCR test you have to pay for, whatever. That would be interesting to see. But I'm curious to see who blinks first. And then we'll speak about, might as well speak about this. Over the weekend, Sha'Carri Richardson came in dead last against the Jamaicans, which again isn't nothing to be embarrassed about, because, you know, Jamaicans, we all know, are incredibly fast, and she was facing some of the best in the world, and it probably didn't work out for her, especially when you consider all the smack that she was talking throughout the week, which again I don't have a problem with. I've long said, I think similar to like UFC fighters and box and, you know, people that are professional combat athletes in that respect, boxing, MMA, whatever it may be, there is a level of delusion that you need in order for you to get into a ring in your boxers and your underwear and fight another man in a ring or a cage. You need to be somewhat delusional. No person that's rationally minded, sensible, even killed, is going to think it's a good idea to earn their living, pay their rent or their mortgage, or put their kids through school by beating up another man in a cage. It just doesn't make any sense. You have to be a little bit delusional, a little bit cuckoo. So when I see Sha'Carri Richardson, you know, talking all that smack about she's not intimidated, she's going to do her race, they're watching her, don't watch me, all this stuff, I'm for it. Because you either win really big or you lose really big, but you have to keep that same energy. And I think in general for this internet, it's funny to laugh at, because she's put herself front and center, and the whole controversy with kind of pulling out or not being able to go to Tokyo Olympics and whatnot, because she was basically, you know, favored having a joint over being able to compete on that stage, is a bit embarrassing. But overall, I think it's okay, because we're allowed on the internet to laugh at her mishaps now, because again, it's just funny to see somebody talk a big game and then fall flat in their face. But I'm also, the same token, I'm also very much here for the redemption arc. I can't wait to see her prove everybody wrong in a couple of months or maybe a few months and blitz the field and, you know, whatever interview happens after that. I can't wait for all that content. That's going to be sweet because you know this girl is going to save tweets, is going to bookmark tweets, going to screenshot articles and, you know, Instagram stories. She's going to retweet all that stuff that people were saying because quite clearly she's driven and wants to prove everybody wrong and probably has that X factor that you think she's going to basically get to the top again. So for sure, you're definitely going to see it, but we're allowed to laugh now. We're allowed to definitely have a little bit of a laugh and joke, a little bit of an LOL moment because you can't deny this was insanely funny to see somebody talk so much and finish completely last in the race itself. Like, look at that. They're racing again. He just quite clearly you knew it wasn't going to go well. And it's just the brutality of life, innit? How life just smacks you in the face. And she didn't even finish like 4th or 5th. She finished dead last. Do you know what I mean? That's what makes it so brutal. Article courtesy of TMZ, it says Sha'Carri Richardson returned to the racetrack wasn't quite close as she'd hoped. She came in last place against some of the same woman she'd beat a couple months ago. The US sprinter who was disqualified from competing in the Summer Tokyo Olympics took a mug from Saturday at Prefontaine Classic where she was set to race women's 100-meter dash against 8 others, including 3 Jamaicans who took gold, silver and bronze during the games in her absence. And that's her obviously coming last and waving to the crowd, which I have a lot of respect for her too, fronting the media. Obviously she was talking a little bit of nonsense, but still I like that. She pulled out of the 200, which wasn't cool, but you know, we can move. When the gun went off, everyone was hurtling down track, but it quickly became clear that Sha'Carri was falling behind. She ended up in 9th place with a time of 11 seconds, 0.14. I could never, like, you know what I mean? She came in last, but she's still gonna beat most of the people that you know, including boys, mostly boys, which many people weren't expecting. By the way, Jamaican athletes ran the table again with 10.54. Not married though. Sha'Carri wasn't because Sha'Carri got ahead of the criticism. Here's what she said in response right after the race when everyone's obviously questioning her.
Face these ladies from the Olympic Games.
Coming out today, it was a great return back to the sport. I wanted to be able to come and perform. Having a month off, dealing with all I was dealing with. I'm not upset at myself at all. This is one race. I'm not done. You know what I'm capable of. Count me out if you want to. Talk all the shit you want, because I'm here to stay. I'm not done. I'm the 6th fastest woman in this game.
The girls behind her.
And can't nobody ever take that from me. Congratulations to the winners. Congratulations to the people that won. But they're not
so funny.
done seeing me yet.
But yeah, again, I don't mind the confidence. I don't mind the bravado. I really don't mind it. I think as much as it's incredible and funny, incredibly funny to laugh at her, I also think the redemption arc is going to be so sweet if she does manage to turn it around and, you know, go back to all the people that were kind of discounting her and counting her out and saying that she wasn't as good as she thinks she is and she needs to be humbled and all that stuff. Because I don't believe in that. I don't think you need to be humble. I think you can talk your shit and also back your shit. You don't need to be meek with your arms behind your back and talking like a flipping saint and being like a quiet boy with the media. You don't need that. I think it's good to be a little bit, you know, flagrant, talking out, you know, letting your nuts hang, for lack of a better term. I think that's okay. I'm not really down on that kind of stuff. So big up Sha'Carri Richardson. It didn't work out, obviously. You know, you still can't deny that picture is absolutely hilarious to be finishing dead last after all that smacky talking. But again, the redemption arc is going to be sweet and everyone likes a comeback story. Well, I hope so anyway, because that's, you know, why else would you be living if you can't live in a comeback story? And then we'll end it with this one. This is courtesy of Kanye, of course. He's been on the top of the list in terms of the conversation around hip hop in general, what's going on with the album. And now there's another sort of plot line, another sort of thing to kind of keep attention on. This weird sort of back and forth that he's having with Drake that doesn't really make much sense. Which is confusing to kind of get at the genesis of what the actual issue is. But for us fans in general, it's highly, highly, highly entertaining. So this was a post that Kanye put on his feed that he obviously deleted later on. But this was in response, if I'm not mistaken, to a track that came out featuring Drake on a Trippie Redd single that was due to come out of the album. But for whatever reason, it didn't come on the album. I think Trippie Redd explained in the interview that supposedly Drake was finishing it really late, and the word around town or in the industry that supposedly Drake takes long to finish verses and he does them at the right minute. He hands them in right at the last minute because he's a perfectionist and whatnot, etc. But regardless of how it transpired, it worked out perfect for him. Trippie was able to get some love for the album itself, sans the Drake feature. It still sounded pretty good. I think, in my opinion, it's maybe his best body of work outside of his mixtapes from the beginning to the front. And then as soon as the single leaked the following week, or maybe even a few days later, and people actually got to hear what he said and how that triggered Kanye, I think in general he's probably happy that it worked out the way it did, regardless if it wasn't on the original album that dropped. So if you're curious about what it was, I think it was this. I got it here on this page. So this is basically in response. So the Drake track is, I think it's called Betrayal, Trippie Redd featuring Drake, and he says the following line.
All these fools I'm beefing that I barely know. 45, 44, burnt out, let it go. You ain't shit for me, it's set in stone.
That to me is hilarious, right? The fact that he says all these fools I'm beefing that I barely know. 45, 44, burned out, let it go. Maybe kind of depicting, people would say 45 and 44 are in relation to Pusha T and Kanye's ages. And then him saying, yeah, you ain't changing shit for me, it's set in stone. It's hilarious that such an innocuous, lightweight, funny, humorous, kind of playgroundy kind of insult of a bar would really set off Kanye in the way it did, where he's posting this meme of Joker from the Joker movie, right? We live in a society where, and then he's also posting a screenshot of the meme, obviously in his messages, with the text at the bottom that says, I live for this, I've been fucked with by nerd ass jockey niggas like you my whole life, you will never recover from this, I promise you. And if you look at the recipients of the message itself, it looks like he tagged, or he included Drake in his group chat of his SMSs, and I think maybe that might be Virgil's or a few other people, I'm not too sure, are involved. And it's hilarious. I'm not too sure what the top bit is here about the green watch. Some people are alleging that Kanye wanted the same green watch that Virgil made for Drake, that he kind of shouted out in that song with Travis. I'm not too sure if that's just facts, but it's just interesting to me, just from a viewer point of view, to see, you know, usually Kanye is very kind of what's that thing called? He's got a lot of self-confidence, obviously, right? He doesn't necessarily feel like somebody that feels like he's inadequate. The only time you see Kanye act somewhat inadequate or a little bit sort of shy is really in the space of kind of, you know, design or fashion elites, right? Or like the top of the top, you see him with Demna, and you quite see the reverence that he has for him and whatever. And earlier on, when he was talking to people like Anna Wintour and Karen Warfield, you can see that he knew what part they played in an industry that he clearly wants to be involved in, and he was a little bit more like, you know, reserved and less kind of bombastic as he usually is. But when it comes to music stuff, you can't really talk to him, right? He kind of walks around and kind of, you know, lets his nuts hang, for lack of a better term. So it's interesting to see in music that somebody like a Drake could still touch his buttons and make him react in such an emotional, sensitive way. It's just odd. You never really see this with him. You can clearly see he feels inadequate. He feels less than. He feels, I don't know, whatever he feels for whatever reason. It's just interesting to see Superman, that is Kanye, reacting this way, right? Basically, Drake is his kryptonite. That is it. Drake is definitely Kanye's kryptonite, and we don't really know why. People like to say it's because, you know, Kanye didn't give Drake that instrumental or whatever, or didn't get a tune, but I don't really think that's the case. I don't think you can get to this point where there's this much animosity between people. I know sometimes artists can be sensitive. We saw what happened with Meek because Drake didn't retweet or share his album, and it led to the flipping back-to-back freestyles and whatnot, and Meek alleging, or basically saying that Drake doesn't write his raps, cool. But in general, it takes more than that for you to be like mortal enemies, and it feels like they're at a point where they can never recover. And also, this really spits in the face of flipping Karen Civil, that flipping grifter, who basically alleged that they were cool now and they were on speaking terms. Like, and we knew that wasn't true. We knew that was never going to happen. More likely than not, that relationship is completely deteriorated. But I would like to know what the real reason is why they don't like each other, especially why Kanye doesn't like Drake, because I feel like it's more so on Kanye's end than anything. What really is the issue here? And maybe that goes to the point where Drake said, he basically alleges that he feels like Kanye is the one that told Pusha T about his kid, or whatever it may be. It definitely came from his side in that respect, maybe. But I really want to know what the reason is. I'm curious. I'm really curious, because at the end of it, it's just seeing Kanye, you know, thinking about Kanye, frantically searching on Google for a Joker meme and writing that and putting him in like thinking of him being that angry and very unchristian like is super hilarious. But in general, for the fans, guess what? we're going to get the best music now. We're going to get the best product ever. Maybe the fact that we've seen these amazing performances in stadiums is maybe Kanye's reaction to what Drake's been doing behind the scenes. We don't know. And, you know, great work usually comes from tension, right? Animosity, struggle, backs against the wall. And we're probably going to see both of these guys put out some of their best work because of this beef, because of this tension, because of this rivalry. And I, for one, as a fan of music, as a fan of the culture, I can't wait. I really can't, because I feel like Kanye is flattered to deceive in his last previous albums. I think the leak that we have so far, or what we heard of this album, Donda, sounds incredible. It's definitely up there with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, but The Life of Pablo and, you know, the other one, where he took the iPhone picture, they were pretty shit. The Ye album, I think that was called, right? They weren't the best. And then, of course, you know, like, we know Drake is still maybe lacking in terms of having a classic body of work in terms of an album. I don't believe so, but people do believe that. If that's the case, this is definitely the one that you want to come out with, where people can say undeniably you've got one classic in your arsenal or your library, and you sprinkle a couple of tracks in there that take no and insult at the person you're fighting with, and then boom, we've got a great conclusion. So I think for fans it's incredible. For Kanye, it's really funny to see a grown man, you know, researching or finding these memes in order to kind of insult Drake, but, you know, all's fair in love and war, I guess. All is fair. Anyway, that's the Agostinho Show, episode number 487. Thanks so much for tuning in. As per usual, it's been a pleasure to have your company. If you are the first time viewing, of course, make sure you smash like and subscribe, leave a comment down below. And if you're listening via the podcast app, please leave me a 5-star review and share the show with your friends. That'll be greatly appreciated. But until then, take care. Peace. Goodbye. Sayonara. Adios.